with Chet Baker, I remember buying a Chet Baker record, hearing the Jerry Mulligan stuff, you know.
Oh yeah.
And when I was a kid, like 13 years old, I had friends that were older, and they would listen to music, and there were these two guys named Fred and Howie Keshen, who had a store in Miami Beach called Brothers Clothing Store. Mm-hmm. And I would go in there, they had a record player in the store. So we'd listen to records while people bought clothes and all that, and you know, and Howie was a good friend of Buddy Rich. In fact, he was known as Buddy's friend, because Buddy didn't have many friends, so that's Buddy's friend.
Yeah.
But he also was familiar with all kinds of jazz musicians. I love to just go in. You know how it is when you first discover jazz, you just want to talk about it with everybody. Mm-hmm. Anybody that knows about it. You mean you heard Miles? You heard Miles live once? You know, like blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
yeah. I'm still like that, too.
You know, and I was of the generation where people had actually heard Charlie Parker, and they would tell me about, you know, because they were just one generation past me. Mm-hmm. Bird died when I was 3, so. I said, what does Chet Baker sing like? I said, I read here that he sings, you know, because I would read Downbeat. And I'd never heard him sing. And Howie said, he sings like a guy who's very messed up.
Well, he was in a way.
And he was, you know, and but one thing about Chet, we really shared a love of songs together. And it's like Dave Frischberg and I were talking once. There are some cats get into the music because they want to play an instrument, you know, and that's why they become musicians, to play an instrument. And other guys get into music because they want to play songs. And, you know, I feel that anybody who plays, it has to be a combination of both, really. I mean, you have to love the instrument you're playing. But Chet and Sonny Rollins, Iris, you know, really loved songs, you know. Even though Chet didn't always vary his repertoire that much. He liked a certain group of songs. You know, one thing we shared, I mean, I met Chet, I had left Mingus the month before. It was August of 1973. I was 21 years old. And I got a phone call from a guy named Stan Gage, a drummer who was playing with Chet, and Jimmy and Harvey Schwartz, Harvey S. And Harvey S. was playing bass when he had a longer name. And Harold Danko was playing piano. And he called me, he said, we're playing at a place on Long Island every Saturday night called the Town Crier in East Islip. And would you like to come down? Because Chet's saxophone player, Phil Urso, we did a week at the Half Note, but the Half Note had moved uptown, where it died. But he went back, Phil Urso has gone back to Colorado because he didn't trust himself in New York with Chet, because it was dangerous, you know, drug-wise and everything. And Chet was on the methadone program. So, you know, that way he was trying to get himself together. And he says, you know, Chet's had some teeth problems, so he's not strong enough to really carry the night as a quartet, so he really does need a saxophone player.
I can relate it to that as a trumpet player.
Yeah, so, you know, if you want to come down, we've told Chet about you, that, you know, you're the best guy for this gig. We think you'd fit with Chet, and, you know, I guess one of the values I got was, I mean, I always wanted to have a beautiful sound. And so I went down and I played 2 Saturdays with Chet. There was no real music. There was a tenor book.
Okay.
But I was playing alto, and it was harder for me to transpose the tenor parts than the concert parts. I could play concert parts. But Harold was using the concert parts because it was new to him too, and, you know, and the bass player, Harvey, they had all the concert parts. So I had to do everything by ear. And I started to pick up the tunes by ear and everything, and did the best I could, you know, to get through them. And I managed to. And finally, Chet said, "You want to come to Chicago? We're leaving for Chicago on Monday." So that's when I, you know, went with Chet, and we kind of became friends pretty quickly. You know, like I think he liked me. I think I reminded him a little bit of the way he was before he got all messed up. I was messed up too, but not on drugs. But I was confused. I'd had a really bad childhood. And we had similar relationships with our mothers. His mother, it was funny, he used to laugh because I used to sing for the neighbors when I took up saxophone because my voice changed, and I started to sound like, I'm in the mood for love, you know, at 13. But before that, As I mentioned earlier, I'd had my best friend die when I was 12 years old, and we were really into playing guitars, and we did all the things like Everly Brothers, Little Richard, all the rhythm and blues, and rockabilly, and Buddy Holly, and whatever you want to call that music. You know, we were. But when he died, I didn't want to play the guitar anymore, and I couldn't listen to that. So that's when I started to listen to my parents' records and discovered jazz and started to go out and buy jazz records and that kind of thing. And I learned all these tunes: Sinatra, Billie Holiday, you know, June Christie, Chris Connor.
By listening, right?
By listening, yeah. So then the neighbors would come over, and I had this beautiful voice. So they say, "Is Bobby going to sing for us?" So I would sing for the neighbors. Several of the neighbors would come over, and I'd give these little a cappella concerts and be there. I had no idea what the words meant. I'd never kissed a girl or anything. And I'd go, you know, you ain't gonna bother me no more, no how. Love goes just so far, no more. Woke up this morning and found I didn't care for you no more, not now. And nobody told me those intervals were hard. I would sing that. I would sing Just in Time. I found you just in time. I got really into Mel Torme because he had a voice a little bit like that. And then when I heard Chet sing, I liked him a lot, you know, but I didn't hear him for a couple of years later until I already started to play the saxophone. I would sing for the neighbors, and Chet said it was a funny thing because his mother enrolled him in amateur shows
Oh,
when he was like 10, 12 years old.
okay.
And he was singing all these tunes that he had no idea what they meant either. So we used to laugh about the fact that we were both like these young singers singing all these deep love songs, much more grown up than we were, and laughing that we had no idea. You know what? I got a right to sing the blues. I got a right to moan and cry. And down around the river, why? You know, we'd be laughing with the lyrics. So, you know, we shared that. And I remember we drove to California together with Chet and his then girlfriend, Ruth, who I liked. Ruth is a very close friend of mine. And she is a singer and still sings. But we knew a lot of tunes. We had Jacques Pelzer with us, too, the flute saxophone player from Belgium. The four of us drove from New York to San Diego together. And we must have sung 200 songs. We had a Frank Sinatra tape, and we had this Kenny Dorham with Sonny Rollins tape that Chet listened to a lot. And he really liked that one with Falling in Love with Love and My Old Flame. I think Chet, but with the Sonny Rollins with Kenny Dorham version.
Oh yeah, that's a great album. Yeah.
You know, it's called Jazz something, and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful record. And anyway, Chet, I think Chet really liked that. I think Hank Jones might be on that record. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But anyway, he loved that, and we listened to a lot of Sinatra. And we just sang back and forth. We'd say, "Hey, Chet, do you know this tune? You know, it's only human for anyone to want to be in love." She would go, "Oh yeah, but who wants to be in love in vain?" So we'd end up singing it. So we didn't really play these tunes that much, but we talked about tunes and we sang them. And I think what I learned from Chet was economy with which he played, finding the good note, you know, like not having to take so many notes to find the good note. I mean, being able to play a lot of notes too, because Chet could. He could play these very involved eighth note lines.
Oh yeah.
You know, and I think I told you that, you know, what Jerry Mulligan said about Chet, which makes sense. He said, Chet knows everything about chords but their names. You know, he asked me a couple times to explain harmony to him. I remember once we were on the beach,
Okay.
you know, and I was explaining that, and Chet said, I wouldn't want to really think that much. I said, well, you know, you don't think that much, and you don't really need it because, I mean, you know what a diminished chord is, right? He said, yeah, I think so. You know, like it's one of these, right? You know, I mean, he was sang it for him.
One of these.
You know, and I said, and I hear you playing things on diminished scales, and so you understand that. And you know, I mean, I could just tell you what you already play, if you want to know the names of them. You know, what I mean, names of that. I mean, I could have shown him some things, you know, but he really, with Chet, you just told him what his first note was.
Wow.
And then he had it. I mean, we used to do a thing where we'd play. Sometimes he'd be late when we had this gig at Strikers. So Harold Danko and I and Dave Shapiro, Cameron Brown, whoever was playing bass, would open the night with a tune, and sometimes we'd put it in a funny key, like Stella by Starlight, an E, or something
Really?
like that. Yeah, and just for us to practice. I mean, we might start with something simpler than that, but then around the second tune, if Chet still wasn't there, which he was late sometimes,
Okay.
then we'd go into some tune in some unusual key, and Chet would come in, pick it right up, no problem, any key. He was cool.
Wow.
And also, even on tunes like Conception and Speak No Evil that we used to play,
No problem, huh? Any
no
key?
problem. I was the one with the problem. I was the one that knew harmony, and I was trying to figure out what scales I should use in these things, and he was just playing. So then I realized by knowing Chet and by knowing Zoot and Ira Sullivan also, who were two other players that really didn't know, quote, no harmony, that I had to play more like that.
Wow.
That, in other words, I had to take whatever I knew and completely forget it and learn it at the moment, as much as I could, to avoid any. So when I practiced, I would consciously think about what I was going to do substitute-wise and this and that, but to be in the moment as much as possible and just hear, to know what was going on was a lesson that I was learning from Chet because that was how he played. And the beauty of playing with him, too, was also from an aesthetic point of view. It's like, sort of like being in a band is like having a role in a play. I mean, you're either the lyrical one, the strong one, the harmonically adventure. I mean, there are different roles you can have at different times. Just like in a play, sometimes the guy is the lover, and other times then you realize that the lover has an underhanded side or another. You know what I mean? So, but with Chet, it was very, very clear. I think it was one of the critics really. Sometimes certain critics, like Peter Keepnews, is a funny critic. I mean, I kind of like him. He said a couple of things about me in print that told me what I was doing when I didn't realize what I was doing, which is really, I think, what a critic should do. Should tell you something, and these happen to be good things, I've also been told negative things. Mark Miller once wrote a kind of negative review of me on an off night, and I wrote him a letter back saying how right he was on that particular night. I hate to write this letter, but you were right. I was not inspired that night. Good things like what Peter said once was that I was a perfect foil for Chet because I had two ways of basically playing. I could either kind of play quiet and lyrically like him, almost not mimic him, but play the feelings that he had laid out, or I would play much harder. So I could be kind of a Coltrane or Sonny Coltrane to his Miles. In other words, if he was being very melodic, I might get more angular. But at other times when he was melodic, I would be melodic along with him. So I had the option all the time of those two things, or somewhere in twixt in between, between that. So that made it a very nice situation creatively to play with him. Like Tom Harrell, for example, Tom and I thought a lot the same ways. We both were lyrical and harmonic and intellectual about things. So it was a different vibe, playing with Tom. We did a lot of things for each other and with each other, but we didn't have that particular thing. We had that. And Claudio Roditi, too. There was another dynamic there. And they were all positive and all creative and all fun. With Chet, though, it was very clear cut. What I mean to say is that there were times like when you played The Thrill Is Gone, there were times to really I would enjoy playing long notes and playing a certain way and trying to get a certain pathos into it. And then other times, there were times when it was time to I would play fast and intensely, where up a notch from Chet's intensity maybe. Chet still had that reserve, and I'd go past it and not have reserve like for example Coltrane with Miles. Where Sonny Rollins with Miles to me was interesting because he more echoed the way Miles was playing, rhythmically and emotionally, where Train really wasn't trying to play like Miles. I mean, he had his own lyricism. That's what I'm trying to say.
What time you say you were really practicing hard, and then you were into the things playing long solo, then Chet says something.
Oh yeah, I've told that story.
Yeah, I saw that was a little funny, but it was really made a good point.
All right. Well, I've told it elsewhere, but I'll tell it again if you like. We were in Detroit at a place called Baker's Keyboard, not Chet Baker's keyboard, but Clarence Baker was the owner.
Okay.
And he was always at the corner of the bar drinking, I believe he drank champagne all the time. I was playing very long solos. And also between sets I was practicing in the kitchen, and I was going to sleep practically with this horn and falling asleep practicing. And I was 22 years old. So we're on the bandstand, and Chet whispers in my ear after a particularly long and probably annoying solo, man, do you think you might be able to keep your solos down to say twice as long as mine? And I said, oh, yes. No, I'm sorry, Chet, of course I will, sure. And then I proceeded to forget I said that, and I just, couldn't stop playing, I just keep going. And so between sets, I'm there in the kitchen with my exercises and this and that. And he says, Bob, this is not a research laboratory. He said laboratory. It's not a research laboratory. So finally, by the end of this night, I honed myself down to reasonable length solos, and think was playing a little more the way he wanted me to. Mm-hmm. So that morning we were having breakfast at this place called Tad's in Detroit, as I said. And we're eating breakfast, and I said, Chet, he's there with his eggs over easy. I'm sorry, man, about like earlier tonight, when you told me to cut my solos down, I just, couldn't do it, but I think I was a little better later, right? He said, yeah, you're okay. I said, yeah, I know sometimes it's hard for me to do that, He says, well, Bob, the thing is that most people really don't know, and what they do know, the way they tell if somebody's good is by how loud, how high, and how fast somebody can play. And you're a very gifted young man. And if you wanted to, you could be, and maybe, are already in some ways, but he said you could be, I'll be more exact. You could be one of, if not the loudest, highest, and fastest guys out there. But were you to do that, I would be kind of disappointed in you. Because I would hope that you would opt for beauty.
Wow, that's really deep.
I thought that was beautiful, to opt for beauty.
But at 22, you don't know better sometimes.
Right, 22 you don't, but I should have though, because I'm in that situation, But I just come from Mingus's band too. So there was another influence there, there was another kind of beauty. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's what Monk meant by ugly beauty. Mm-hmm. There were times when we'd all be playing like a bunch of banshees in Mingus's band, but there was a certain beauty in the recklessness of some of that bull in the china shop type of playing that some of Mingus's pieces required. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Mingus's band could be, also there was some beauty in that, but I knew the kind of beauty Chet meant. And maybe to get back to your first thing about tone, is, when you play with people with beautiful sounds, it kind of rubs off on you. Mm-hmm. And I think because they stress the idea of sound. Also, when you grow up playing the type of club dates that I had to play sometimes with weddings and bar mitzvahs and those kind of things, dances, you wanted to play in a way that would make the people want to go home and make love. Mm-hmm. So if you're playing with an abrasive, ugly sound, people don't really, that's not making them feel closer, when they're dancing.
Mm-hmm. Intimacy.
And you can play with a beautiful, intimate type of sound, then, that's your job as a musician. That's what you're doing. You're their catalyst to deep feelings.